So The Five Bloods, made by Spike Lee. Spike Lee's first film on Netflix. Big fan of his work. He is vital at the moment. I think his work is especially. Black Klansman was his last film before this, which we saw in theaters back in 2018. And I think it's safe to say we were both fans of that movie. I know it was in my top 10 of that year. You really enjoyed it as well, didn't you, Dan?
I did, yeah, absolutely.
So what I actually did, about half never seen Black Klansman. So what I did, the day before the Five Bloods was released, in the evening, so Thursday evening, I rewatched Black Klansman to kind of remind myself of that movie. I'm glad I did, because it essentially sets up the Five Bloods really well. There's a scene right at the beginning of Black Klansman where he's being interviewed for the job as a police officer, and they ask him about his thoughts on the Vietnam War, and they make a joke about Muhammad Ali kind of avoiding being drafted up for fighting in the Vietnam War. The Five Bloods actually starts with a real footage of Muhammad Ali being interviewed about the Vietnam War and not wanting to go fight that war. So it actually sets up. I think you can easily watch Black Klansman and you can watch this back to back, and it sets it. They complement each other really, really nicely. The story here involves basically the Five Bloods is a unit in Vietnam War basically made up of five black people who become very close, obviously, through the Vietnam War. They find some gold, and they basically decide during the Vietnam War back in 1971 that they're going to bury this gold, and they're going to return later on in life to find the gold. It's American gold, and basically use it, however they please. Some of the members think it should be donated to important causes like the Black Lives Matter movement, things like that, whereas some have just had enough of being ripped off in life that they want to kind of use it for themselves. So the film kind of jumps back and forth between 1971, where a horrible accident happens, which is haunting one particular member of the Five Bloods, and jumps to the present day, where four of the Five Bloods, members of the Five Bloods, kind of return back to Vietnam to find the gold. Here's a clip. Okay, so starting off, this is definitely one of the best films of 2020 so far. And again, it just further cements why Spike Lee is one of the most kind of important and vital directors working today. He's a filmmaker with great style. This film has bags and bags of style. And what I love especially over his last couple of films, how he's introduced real life footage and documentary footage into his films more and more. So there are those moments all through the film where they'll reference an event or they'll reference a person, and it will cut to footage of said event, or it will cut to a picture of that real life person. Spike Lee is basically giving, he's not just talking about these things. He wants to give these people, these black people who've lost their lives in horrific incidents, he wants to give these people a face on his film. And I really love that about his style. He just doesn't make offhand comments. He backs it up with pictures and images and footage. So I really love that he's kind of put in more and more of that into his movies. But again, what he does so well is he deals with these themes like Black Lives Matters and things like that. Very important, very vital right now, obviously, with everything that's going on in the world. But he packages them in a way where they are entertaining films to watch. They are still thrilling films to watch. And this film does have some great moments where it's just thrilling, and that they mainly come from Delroy Lindo, who is very big on social media at the moment, because his performance, oh my lord, it is one of the best performances, certainly the best performance I've seen of 2020 so far, and one of the best performances I've seen in a long time. This is an actor who I have fond memories of from films that I watched in the 90s, but he's always on the kind of peripheral. He's never like, I can't remember seeing Delroy Lindo in like a main role before. I'm sure he has done big parts, but I can only remember him from films like Ransom and things like that, where he's like the kind of cop who's, the hard-nailed cop who's gonna solve the crime. He's kind of on the sidelines. I've never seen him like this before. His performance is incredible. And I tell you, 2021 award season needs to happen for this performance alone. He is outstanding.
Wow.
And it's great to see people on Twitter and Facebook showing their support of his performance. It is a performance which is angry and like guttural. You can tell he's like kind of getting these emotions from deep within himself. He like spits. It's a performance of spit and like fire and rage. And he's not necessarily a likable character. He's not. His character is one who has had issues, who's maybe been affected the most by the Vietnam War and suffers with PTSD massively. And that's affected every one of his relationships, and there's a kind of father-son story running through that with his character. So he's not a nice character. What he plans to do with the money, he's selfish, he's mean to his son. But the performance is just so compelling and engaging. You can't help but empathize with him a little and kind of be on his side, even when he kind of reaches peak craziness. And there's a brilliant sequence where he's kind of walking through the jungle, speaking to the camera, and his eyes are kind of looking into his soul for like a whole 5 minutes. It is a remarkable performance, and for that alone, the film deserves your time. But it is a film which explores an interesting aspect of history, in that Black people have fought in World War II. They fought in the Vietnam War. And there's an interesting statistic in the film where during the Vietnam War, 11% of America's population were Black people, and 33% of the people fighting in Vietnam were Black people. So the proportion is so off. And it raises that question of, why should Black people be fighting in American wars when all they've got to go back to is racism and xenophobia and hate from white Americans? So it's a really compelling piece of filmmaking, as always, from Spike Lee. There are a few reservations. I think the pacing is a bit off. I think at times it's a little bit disjointed between the flashbacks and the flash forwards. And it doesn't have that kind of narrative drive. I think watching BlacKkKlansman kind of showed me how great that movie is in just driving the narrative forward. It's relentless and it flies by. That's like 2 hours, 10 minutes, but it flies by. This film is 2 hours, 30. I do think there are moments which could have been cut and maybe reined in. It is a bit dense in some places. So I do have some issues, reservations about the pacing of it. And it doesn't feel like, whilst the message is equally as important as BlacKkKlansman, I think it doesn't do as good a job as bringing that message to the present day as BlacKkKlansman did, which obviously ended with like Trump rallies. BlacKkKlansman had that shocking footage of Trump, Trump's America, and the violence on the streets and things like that. Really powerful ending. This doesn't do as good a job, I don't think, as connecting the two. That said, it is one of the best films of the year. Like you said earlier on, we've been spoilt this week, with 3 really solid cinematic movies. And Delroy Lindo, if there is an award season next year, you're going to hear his name said a lot. So do go seek it out. It's important. It's vital. And I really loved it.